Everyone has heard strange and unusual stories. My story is about how my half-face mask saved my life and still does to this day. Late one December, I was driving from California to my home state, Oregon, to visit my family for the holidays. The trip started fine, but I soon ran into a small snowstorm. At first, it didn't seem too bad. Just a lot of snow falling all at once. Since I had installed snow tires before the journey, I wasn't too worried. However, as the snow intensified and the roads became more treacherous, I started to reconsider driving further. The heavy snowfall, combined with the deep snow on the ground, made me think about stopping for the night. I thought it'd be best to find a place to rest, wait out the storm, and give my car's heater a break. I didn't want it to overheat or worse, stop working entirely. But as I scanned the landscape, I saw no buildings or signs of shelter nearby. My only choice was to keep driving and hope I'd find a town or an exit soon. After an hour of driving through worsening conditions, I finally saw a highway sign. My heart sank when I read it. The nearest city was still 162 miles away. By this time, the snow was pounding against my windshield, and I knew I wouldn't last much longer. The clock on my car's dashboard read 1:21 a.m., and I decided that the next turnoff I saw would be my best shot at finding shelter. 30 minutes passed before I noticed a small road ahead. 2 wooden poles, probably part of a fence, marked the entrance. I turned onto the road, which felt rough and gravelly. A short distance later, a small cabin came into view. The cabin's lights were off, but it looked well maintained. I parked my car under a tall, scraggly tree in the front yard, grabbed an extra jacket, and pulled my half-face mask up over my ears to keep warm. With my cap snug on my head, I trudged through the freezing wind toward the cabin. My hands ached from the cold. I regretted not bringing gloves, but at least the rest of my body was warm. As I approached the cabin, I noticed no signs of life, no car in the yard or footprints in the snow. I knocked on the door 3 times and waited. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I called out. "Sorry to bother you, but I need a place to stay for a few hours." No one answered, so I knocked again, louder this time. "I'm not here to cause trouble," I said. "I just need shelter until the storm passes. I'll leave by sunrise." When no one responded, I tried the door handle. It was unlocked. "I'm coming in," I announced. "If someone's here, let me know." The door creaked open easily, and I stepped inside, closing it behind me. The cabin was small, with a living room, a tiny kitchen, a washroom, and 2 bedrooms. It was dark inside, but my eyes had adjusted to the darkness. I pulled out my phone and used its flashlight to scan the walls for a light switch, but found none. To conserve battery, I turned off the light and put my phone on airplane mode. Before switching it off, my light caught several paintings on the walls. Most were ordinary: landscapes, harbors, and similar scenes. One painting showed a fox hunt, but there was nothing unusual about it. However, one small painting stood out. It depicted a Victorian-era family: a mother, father, teenage girl, and a young child. Their clothes were formal and elaborate, but something about the painting was unsettling. The faces of the mother, father, and child were smooth and featureless, as if someone had erased their eyes, nose, and mouth. Only the teenage girl had a normal face, and she was strikingly beautiful. Feeling uneasy, I glanced at my phone and saw it was past 2 a.m. I decided to check the bedrooms. To my relief, one of the rooms was empty, containing only a bed, dresser, and nightstand. The walls were mostly empty, except for a few uninspired paintings meant to add some character. There didn't seem to be any heating, aside from a chimney, but the room was warm enough that I decided bundling up in my clothes under the blankets would suffice. After all, I wasn't planning to stay long. Just a few hours of rest. Starting a fire felt unnecessary, and I doubted the owners would return at this late hour. I settled into the worn bed, facing the open door and a second door, likely leading to a closet. I pulled my half mask completely over my face to trap the heat and keep warm. Then I set an alarm on my phone for 4:30 a.m., placing it on the nightstand before tucking myself tightly under the covers. Sleep came quickly, but it didn't last long. I woke to the unsettling sound of scratching. I froze, my body tense as the noise repeated. A faint, persistent scraping coming from the closet door. Forcing myself to stay calm, I reasoned it might just be a rat or some other small animal taking shelter in the closet. I cautiously turned onto my back, tugging my mask down slightly to create a narrow slit, just enough to peek out into the dark room. Lying still, my eyes scanned the direction of the noise, my face partially hidden behind the mask like a shield. The scratching grew louder and more deliberate, each sound stretching my nerves taut. Suddenly, it stopped, leaving behind an eerie silence that felt heavier than the noise. The quiet was unnerving, a suffocating stillness that seemed to promise something terrible was coming. Then, the closet doorknob began to turn slowly, the faint creak of metal sending a chill down my spine. My heart raced as I watched it twist, every instinct screaming at me to run. Yet I remained frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The door creaked open slightly, and out emerged a long skeletal neck, topped by a shriveled, almost mummified head. The figure crawled out on all fours, its bony body contorted in unnatural angles. My breath caught as it rose to its full height, nearly brushing the ceiling, its empty eye sockets fixed in my direction. Though I was trembling with terror, I realized it couldn't see me. Or at least I hoped it couldn't. It studied me for a moment before speaking in a raspy, broken whisper. "Strange," it said, its voice hollow and unnatural. "It has no fear of me." The creature's head tilted as it leaned closer, its breath rasping heavily. I fought the urge to scream or bolt. My only chance, I thought, was to remain perfectly still, hoping it would mistake me for something lifeless. "How can it not fear sister?" it murmured, its tone shifting between confusion and anger. Then suddenly, it recoiled, letting out a sharp gasp. "It has no face," the creature whispered, its voice trembling. "It has no face." The monster backed away, repeating the phrase louder each time, almost like a chant. Then it stopped, gathering itself, and leaned back toward me, moving slowly and deliberately. Its decayed breath hit my face, reeking of death, making me gag inwardly. I stayed motionless, not daring to react, as the thing reached for me with its bony hand. Its fingers hovered just inches from my face, as it chanted softly, "No face, no face." The words sounded mournful, almost desperate. I braced for the worst, my mind racing with thoughts of loved ones, the people I'd never see again. Suddenly, the piercing sound of my phone alarm shattered the stillness. The shrill beeping made the creature scream in agony, recoiling violently and thrashing against the wall. It shrieked uncontrollably, stumbling backward toward the closet in fear of the noise. Realizing what had happened, I grabbed my phone. holding up the glowing screen toward the creature like a weapon. The alarm blared on, its relentless beeps filling the room. The loud ringing made the creature shriek even more in terror and confusion as it backed away quickly. Seizing the moment, I turned on my phone's flashlight and switched it to strobe mode, aiming to further disorient the creature. No face. No face. No face. It screamed as it retreated into the darkness of the closet. I kept shining the light on it and, for extra effect, played loud music on my phone while jabbing it toward the monster like a lion tamer. The creature scrambled into the depths of the closet, and I slammed the door shut, locking it in place. The shrieks faded gradually, as if it was retreating deeper into the house. No face, no face, it has no face. The creature's voice echoed as it moved farther away. Once it was silent, I bolted out of the cabin at full speed, jumped into my car, and sped down the gravel road. My whole body was trembling as I drove. When I adjusted my mask, the exposed parts of my skin were as pale as the snow on the ground. By the time I reached the nearest town, I was so overwhelmed I parked my car and broke down crying. The terror of the experience would haunt me forever. Yet, amidst my sobs, I found myself laughing softly. I had survived. I had faced that thing and lived to tell the tale. Physically unharmed, though my mind was scarred. After my emotional outburst, I wiped my tears and walked into a 7-Eleven. The cashier glanced at me as I entered, but I ignored his curious gaze. The store was nearly empty except for an elderly couple browsing the aisles. As the cashier scanned my items, he raised an eyebrow and asked, "Rough night?" "You have no idea," I replied, staring out at the bright winter day. "Did something happen? A breakup or something?" he pressed. He looked younger than me, though at 22, I've always appeared younger than my age. His name tag read Evan, and I decided I had nothing to lose by sharing my story. I recounted everything, from the cabin to the creature. To my surprise, Evan didn't laugh or call me crazy. He turned pale, his horrified expression making it clear he believed me. "Evan, are you okay?" I asked. "What? Oh yeah, it's just..." His voice trailed off as he glanced behind me. I turned to see the elderly couple staring, their faces frozen in the same horrified expression as Evan's. The old man finally spoke. "What do you know about that cabin?" I described it the best I could. Their response left me shaken. The couple explained the cabin's dark history. It had been abandoned for years, condemned after countless disappearances. "No one who stayed there has ever made it out alive," the man said grimly. "If they were ever seen again at all?" Evan added quietly, "One of my best friends stayed there on a dare. I tried to stop him, told him it was a bad idea, but he wouldn't listen. He never came back." His voice wavered as he continued. "When we reported him missing, the police searched the cabin. They found him in the basement." Evan's hands trembled as he described what the authorities found. His friend's body had been mutilated, his eyes, nose, and lips removed, a deep incision from chest to pelvis. All his organs were gone, and even his genitals had been removed. "The worst part," Evan said through tears, "is that the autopsy showed he was alive through all of it." The elderly man placed a comforting hand on Evan's shoulder. "They never found the person or thing responsible," Evan said bitterly. "No tools, no DNA, nothing." The old man turned to me. "People have disappeared in that area for decades, maybe longer, and the bodies always end up the same. That place is evil. It should be burned to the ground, The elderly woman added, "If your story's true, you're the luckiest man alive. In all my years, I've never heard of anyone going into that cabin and surviving." Her words hit me hard. I remembered Evan mentioning the basement. That must have been where the creature retreated. I shuddered at the thought. Somehow, I had escaped, but I knew I'd never forget the horror of that night. It would have dragged me into the basement if my phone hadn't gone off. Shaken, I quickly paid for my items and left the store, feeling even more disturbed than when I first arrived. Exhausted from the lack of sleep and the constant adrenaline that kept me on edge, I decided to check into a hotel. I needed to rest, clear my head, and escape the lingering fear. That night, as I sat on the bed in my hotel room, I held on to the two items that had saved my life. In one hand was my half mask, which had hidden my face from that monstrous creature. In the other, my cell phone, the device that scared it off when I was at my most vulnerable. From that day forward, I made a promise to myself. I would always wear my half mask to bed. It had saved my life, and the least I could do was honor it. That terrifying experience taught me to value life more than ever, and I decided to stop hesitating about things that mattered. Shortly after, I asked my best friend Samantha out on a date. To my surprise and delight, things went perfectly. Samantha and I spent 2 wonderful years together before I recently proposed to her. She said yes. Despite the horrors of that night, life had taken a turn for the better. Since then, I've kept certain habits. I still wear my half mask to bed every night, and I refuse to live in any house with a basement. As an extra precaution, I make sure to lock every door in the house before going to sleep. It's a bit excessive, but after what I went through, you can never be too careful. Samantha, thankfully, has accepted my odd quirks and continues to support me in everything. I couldn't be happier with her by my side, and I feel so lucky to be sharing my life with her. Everything feels perfect now. Still, there's one thing that sometimes unnerves me. Late at night, when the house is silent and still, I occasionally hear faint scratching sounds. It could be my imagination, just paranoia. But sometimes, I swear I hear a soft whisper from inside the closet. No face.